So Adam, thanks so much for agreeing to chat to our students today. Adam is the head gardener in Blarney Castle. So I will pass over to Adam now for his presentation.
Is that coming through okay?
It certainly is.
Brilliant. Right, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted. And I'm going to give you kind of a whistle-stop tour of the grounds and gardens. And as we go through, I'll talk about some of my responsibilities and what I do, and I suppose a little bit about how I got here as well. So there's around 70 acres of gardens here that we manage. But the estate is not only a tourist estate, it's a working estate. And obviously, you know, tourism is our main industry, and we're known for that and known for the castle and the stone, which you see in the picture there. But a lot of the visitors don't realise how much more there is going on. And my job is kind of twofold in that I'm head gardener, I'm also gardens manager. And head gardeners' roles have changed significantly over the years. It's gone from really just looking after the plants in the gardens to all sorts of other responsibilities, including the health and safety aspects, training. From my point of view, it's advertising, event management, getting involved in forestry, biodiversity, the farm, and the tourism, obviously. So the job is extremely varied, and I think any head gardener's role is specific to the gardens in which you are working. And so it can be quite specialized in some senses, but you have to have a huge range of role sort of experience. So the gardens obviously are famous for the stone itself, but really over the last 15 years, we've been building and developing the gardens. There were already great historic gardens here, and you know, historic knowledge and an interest in sort of renovation of the past gardens is hugely important, as well as obviously moving forward with and developing. So the beginnings of these gardens go back to really the 1700s, when the governor of Cork bought the estate, and he built a mansion on the side of the castle. And with that mansion really came the first gardens that we're aware of. And those date to the 1750s. So we have the Rock Close Gardens, which are really a fantasy world. It's outcrops of limestone rock that have been changed and fashioned into various interesting features and given life. There's lots of stories there. The Witch's Stone, the Wishing Steps, and lots of follies. And you can see our dolmen, very large established trees. This is one of our 600 plus yew tree year old. And managing these things, for me coming on board, I came from a background of, I suppose, garden maintenance and garden design. I'll talk about that a little bit in a while, but there was a steep learning curve in many senses of the word, in that I hadn't worked with veteran trees before, and I have huge respect for these trees, and making sure that I knew what was right and how to develop and look after them was a big step, because it's not your average specimen, and if we look after them, they'll be here long after we're gone. That's our Wishing Steps, built in 1757. Witch's Stone, and again, another ancient yew tree. Inside there is the witch's kitchen, built around the tree, and that comes with its own story. Blarney's full of myths and legends, and obviously the tourists love these types of things. But with over 500,000 tourists coming on an annual basis in a normal year, the last 2 years have been rather different for us, and that's been a management headache in itself. Really, impact of numbers of people passing through the gardens is another aspect that we have to manage, and not only from the health and safety side of things, but also from the impact of compaction around plants, damage from people standing on them, And all these types of things have to be taken into consideration. The gardens never stand still. There's always something to develop. And we put in the boardwalks in the bog garden areas we started around 12 years ago. We added the waterfalls. So a lot of construction went into this. And one of my previous jobs, I was involved in landscape construction, and I now have to manage these types of jobs as contractors come in. And having that background knowledge and having worked in various different companies over the last sort of 25 years really gave me a good grounding. And I think one of the things that I'd be saying to students now is don't get stuck in a rut. Don't be afraid to go out and try different things, because each one, it adds another aspect to your experience. It's another string to your bow. And I mean, I started off really coming into horticulture. I was in Askham Bryan College in York, North Yorkshire in the UK, and I came over to Ireland for work experience in my middle year of my HND course and ended up in Adair Manor. And I did 3 months in Adair Manor, and it was great. But after 3 months, I wasn't learning anything new. I'd kind of done everything there that from a maintenance perspective, and the gardens were sitting still. And so I decided that it was time to move on and get some more experience somewhere else. So I ended up then going to SAP Landscapes in Dublin and working for one of their garden maintenance crews. And that really gave me some great grounding, because I got to try lots of different machinery and work in lots of different gardens and industrial sites. So I got a good taste of the industry, really. From there, then we'd sometimes end up on landscaping crews as well. And I mean, moving forward then from SAP, I went to work for various other landscaping companies. And again, each one, they do things differently. It might be that you're working in high-end gardens. It might be that you're working in industrial estates. And working with plants, I worked in a garden centre for one summer just to try and improve my plant knowledge and names. And each one gave me a little bit more of a, I suppose, rounding in experience. And so I moved around quite a bit for the first sort of 5 and 6 years of my career. And then I made the decision to set up my own business. And at that stage, I was still working in York in North Yorkshire. And I decided to get into landscaping. But landscaping is all well and good, but it's one job and then you move on to the next job. And I wanted some bread and butter, some regular income. This is our Seven Sisters. And this is one of the areas I designed. You'll see this Neolithic standing circle. And this area was just really a Sitka spruce woodland that had been planted for forestry. And they came down during a storm. I suppose it was 9 years ago now. And we ended up with a greenfield site that was just a blank canvas. So it being Blarney, we were able to get a bit adventurous and put in this Neolithic stone circle as a garden feature, which you wouldn't get away with in many places, but planted around it lots of soft plants to soften the hard standing limestone. And again, this comes with a story. It's good to be creative. And I suppose when I started the landscaping business, what I started off doing was advertising myself for garden maintenance, because once I got a few regular clients under my belt from the maintenance side of things, I was able then to kind of have that guaranteed income. It's like, I forget her name, the lady in the florist was talking about the same thing. It's guaranteed income on a weekly basis that you know is coming in, and then you can start to expand and get a bit more creative. And I began my business actually working night shifts in the supermarket and then working afternoons until I got enough work to move up then and stop the night shifts. And don't be afraid to, have a go, because it was a learning curve again. But that's really running that business got me to where I am today, because I had to learn about advertising and accounts and all the boring stuff as well. But one thing that's really carried me through over the years is my love of design. And I am at heart a designer. I love to create spaces, and Blarney's really given me that opportunity. And over the years, we've developed and added to what is a historic and really interesting garden. And to be able to look at, a view like this on the screen and say, I created that, is hugely satisfying. One of the things that used to frustrate me in my business in the UK was I would plan a garden with a client and we would build it. And a lot of the time, let's say 5 or 6 years later, a new person moves into that house and the garden is changed. One of the things I love about working in a historic estate like Blarney is that when we plant a tree here, the likelihood is it's still going to be here in 100 years' time. And when I design a garden, the likelihood is that it's going to remain and people will get to appreciate it for, long term. So the Jeffreys family in Blarney Castle that were the previous owners, they intermarried with the Colthurst family in 1846, and the Colthurst son married the Jeffreys' daughter. Now, the Colthurst estate was a neighbouring estate, and the two estates merged. They then built the mansion, and with the mansion came the finer lawns and fine gardens that were developed, and a totally different style. And one of the things that I suppose is quite special about Blarney is that it still is in private ownership. And we have very much a Robinsonian style of gardening, which is great for biodiversity. We have massive amount of wildlife on the estate, and I've learned over the years how to manage that. But within the heart of the garden, we have a very sort of high-end maintained areas with fine lawns that require a different approach. But I was talking about the fact that things don't change, and this is a photo from probably around 100 years ago. And if you compare to now, very little difference. So it's important to maintain historic sites, but it's also important to keep moving forward. Tourism in Blarney, this is a postcard from 100 years ago. Tourism is one of our main industries, and I've had to learn quite a lot about operating a garden within the tourist industry and dealing with the health and safety aspect of these large numbers of people moving through the estate. With the new house came an expansion of the gardens and our arboretums. And we have one of the largest tree collections in Ireland now. And managing that is another aspect of my job, which I really enjoy, because the trees come from all over the world and we have such a great resource for the future. And if we look after them now as they're forming and reaching maturity, they'll be here for a long time to come. But some of our trees date back to the planting time around the mansion. So you have 120, 150-year-old Douglas firs, a lot of older trees, plus the western red cedars, Douglas fir, Monterey pine, Sitka spruce are North American introductions. And again, really coming in from a landscaping and garden maintenance background, having to sort of add extra strings to my bow along the way. You've not to be afraid of going and doing a bit of research, doing additional courses, going out for and day training. Some of the courses that are run around the country by the likes of Seed Savers, the National Botanic Gardens. I went to a conifer study course in the UK, which was fascinating and resulted in us creating the Pinetum, which has now 15 years in development and massive collection of conifers. And often you get ideas from the strangest places, but not all of our conifers are new. This is the Thuya plicata, western red cedar from probably the 1870s, 1880s. And it's probably the most photographed tree in Ireland, but you can see why. It's a stunner. We have 2 tree surgeons on the estate. And as I said, I've had to learn a lot about tree management and tree surgery as well, because it's no good me taking the tree surgeons out and advising them unless I've got an idea what I'm actually talking about. So over the years, going off on these different courses and keeping current is very relevant, because things change and advice changes, even from a point of view of the management and the health and safety. Some of our veteran trees need ongoing checking, and we do annual inspections, and we have to keep this side of things up because we need to show that we're managing them on an ongoing basis, because were there to be some kind of incident in the future, we need to show that we've been on top of these trees and we've been checking them. And I won't say it's a nightmare in the sense of having to do it and the paperwork that goes with these things, but at the same time, it's great for the trees because it means that they are maintained and they are looked after very well. This is one of my favorite trees. It's a beech tree, probably 300 years plus. And things like this.
Sorry, Adam, I'm sorry to have to interrupt you, but I have a feeling we might get a countdown clock on our breakout room to close them very soon. So if you don't mind, I might just ask a couple of questions. I'm just
go ahead.
Like, we have a lot of students who joined the course straight from school. So they'll be graduating, in their early 20s. And although there's a big portion of work placement in our course, they might feel that maybe they don't have a lot of confidence to go for a job in somewhere like Blarney Castle. And I'm just wondering, do you have any advice for them?
Absolutely. Don't be afraid is the simple answer. The range of work here, which is what I'm trying to illustrate with some of the photos, is massive. We do all of the garden maintenance side of things. We also do propagation. And what we try to do with our students when they come is to give them a good all-round experience. I don't like the idea of using a student for all the basic work. Obviously, that's got to be done, and the weeding and the tidying and the edging. But at the same time, we're all here to learn. And one of the things that, I'd say to the students is, if not just Blarney, but if you're going anywhere and you show an interest, most people will appreciate that. And if you ask questions, and don't be afraid to speak up and say, could I try this or could I try that? Because I think, from our point of view with students we've got over the years, the best ones are the ones that actually show additional interest in things and don't just wait to be asked. I love when somebody comes in with, a list of questions or something they'd like to know about, because it's good for us as well. It might be you catch us out with a question that we're not sure of, and then we're learning as well. So it's a learning curve for everybody. And I think that, students coming out into the world for whether it be a first job or whether it be work experience, is just look at what you're interested in and try a few different things. But overall, don't be afraid to speak up and ask questions.
Absolutely. Do we have any other questions from our audience? We've had quite a few of our graduates eventually go and work with you, Adam, down in Blarney. Off the top of my head, I know of at least 5, possibly 6 or 7. And they've always had a great experience, and they've learned loads, and you can see them blossom as well as your garden. And I'm just wondering, do you have any positions coming up that maybe our students should keep an eye out for? We're always looking for good people. The last 2 years have been really tough with COVID, and we've been actually 5 full-time staff down, which from my perspective has created a lot of juggling and just managing. And if this year goes well, we'll be looking to bring a couple of people on board again and trying to rebuild our team, really. So I'd never say, there's definitely a position coming up at the moment, but don't be afraid to send your CV in with a cover letter. What we tend to really like is if a student says, could I come in and, meet you and have a look round, and shows an interest. Because if somebody writes in and it's a genuine interest, and they say, I've been before, or I'd like to see this, and I'd like to volunteer, or have you got summer work available? If you don't ask, you don't get. Simple thing is absolutely. put yourself out there. Because listen, Adam, I think we're going to get thrown out of here. So thank you so much for having a chat with us today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Adam.
Take care now.